Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Stage and screen actress Shirley Field became an overnight star when she played beauty queen Tina in The Entertainer, opposite Britain's greatest actor Sir Laurence Olivier. She credited Tony Richardson, the director, with starting her proper career. What was the root of Shirley Field's Insecurity? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Attractive brunette former model who appeared in ingenue roles in several important English films of the early 1960s, Shirley Field is one of Britain's most highly respected actresses. She has starred opposite Laurence Olivier, Albert Finney, Steve McQueen, Michael Caine, Daniel Day-Lewis and Ned Beatty in such classic films as The Entertainer, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, The War Lover, Alfie, My Beautiful Laundrette and Hear My Song. Her career was elevated permanently with a truly breakthrough role as Albert Finney's strong-minded girlfriend Doreen in the groundbreaking social realism drama Saturday Night and Sunday Morning in 1960. After a brief spell modelling and some small parts in films and game shows alongside such well-loved performers as Tommy Cooper, Hughie Green and Bob Monkhouse, Shirley Ann's first significant role was in Michael Powell's classic Peeping Tom as a temperamental film star. Later in the same year she was cast in Beat Girl with Adam Faith before winning the role of Tina, the young beauty queen, in Tony Richardson's film adaptation. This role changed her life overnight and several major film roles soon followed, including Man in the Moon with Kenneth More, Saturday Night and Sunday Morning co-starring with Albert Finney, The War Lover with Steve McQueen and Robert Wagner, Joseph Losey's The Damned, Alfie with Michael Caine and Doctor in Clover with Leslie Phillips. The remarkable thing about Shirley Field is that she has survived and become more interesting with the years. She was born in England on June 27, 1938. She was the third of 4 children, with 2 elder sisters and a younger brother. Ernest Guy Broomfield was murdered by the son of Adrian Dalsey and Annie Dalsey, Harry Dalsey, in 1999 in Walnut Creek, California. Shirley Broomfield's father, a Cockney lorry driver, leaned out of his cab and sized up the 3-year-old girl below. Casually but without real malice, cigarette dangling from his mouth, he uttered a phrase that his third daughter remembered to this day. "Good job you're funny, girl, 'cause you ain't got anything else." Sitting in a diner in Derby, the starting point for a new touring stage production, his daughter, now known to one and all as Shirley Field, recalled the scene. "I looked up and thought, I'll bloody show you, and I think ever since then that's the root of my insecurity. I'm only just learning to assert myself at this great stage in my life." Born in Forest Gate, London, she was too young to be evacuated when war broke out and was sent to a children's home in Bolton when she was 6 years old. "I kept crying and getting into a temper," she recalled of the early months. "I kept saying I've got a little baby brother who is 2 years younger. I had 2 sisters as well, but they were old enough to be evacuated. Finally, the nuns brought my brother up to Bolton, and he was put into a boys' building on the other side of a field, which was full of cows, which I was terrified of. I only got to see him at special times." The family unit had been blitzed. My sister Sonny was married 4 times by the age of 34 and had 6 children. She got cancer and died early. I didn't meet the other sister Joy until I was in my 30s. My mother, meantime, had disappeared into the American South, where she married an American serviceman, but not legally. Joy had been turned back at the ship. My mother's husband promised he'd come back for all her children, and she went out there with that promise. Field only discovered all this much later in life. Her lorry driver father had meantime remarried. He didn't visit the orphanage until his daughter was 13. Dysfunctional doesn't begin to describe her family background. Does that account for her personality's edge of toughness and vulnerability? "I was brought up in the National Children's Home in Bolton for my safety, but returned to London where I was born, aged 15, and began working for the Gas Board as a shorthand typist. I wasn't very good, so they put me in showrooms where I'd sit on cookers to sell them. I also modelled for Revelle magazine, which is how I got spotted by film director Val Guest, who suggested an agent. There is a wistfulness to Field, but it's tempered with a steely determination. She looked back on her life equally with a sense of wonder and pragmatism for the decisions taken, the mistakes made, the road travelled. As for that fractured childhood, she remembered it with cool detachment. I always had a division with my name because I remembered, before I was separated from my family, my father didn't want, and this is his expression, any bleeding film stars in his family, or any bleeding film stars' names. But my mother, an Irish beauty from the East End, was desperate to have that. My oldest sister was called Joy, my youngest sister was called Sunny, or Sonia, after Sonia Henney, I guess, and I was after Shirley Temple, so he called me Anne or Annie. She called me Shirley. I'm the youngest, the third sister. Funny thing, he was sort of prejudiced against the film business early on, and I ended up in it. She was never returned to her family, and when she left, aged 15, it was to modelling and, later, films that she turned in a vain teenager's hope that she would be spotted. She was of medium height, 5'4.5", and amassed a pile of glosses that inevitably led to an offer to work in movies. A Cockney child, she became a beauty queen and landed tiny parts in several films, without making much impression beyond that of exceptionally pretty ingenue. Freed from the institution at the age of 15, Field made her way back to London and into a gas-board typing pool. I was bored silly, she recalled. After being talent-spotted by a photographer, her photos appeared in the likes of Revelle and Titbits magazine. She also took part in local beauty contests and became Miss London. But the teenager wasn't chasing fame. I hoped my mother would see the photographs and she'd find me and want me, she says softly. That was my dream. The film director, Val Guest, asked that deathless phrase, "Do you want to be an actress?" And young Shirley Ann was signed to an agency run by Bill Watts, whose premier client was 22-year-old Joan Collins. I was the youngest and Joan Collins was possibly the oldest, but we all wanted to be like her because she had a pink sports car, lived in Hollywood, and earned £120 a week. It's a horrible experience being a teenager in the film industry. You're exposed to all the wrong influences. It was a very predatory world. You were always at risk. In a succession of films, she was the special girl, the pretty, shapely one who stood out in a scene and maybe had a line or two to speak on screen. But by 1959, Field had had enough of movies. Naive, lacking confidence and unaware of her sexual allure, she decided to quit. I felt like a piece of meat just being picked for the way you looked and the shape you were, she says. I felt exploited, but I don't know what else to do. I didn't know that I was attractive. I'd been invisible all my childhood until I was 15. When people used to shout out, I couldn't believe it. Then I had the best good fortune in the world. She enjoyed a spectacular early career after landing the key role. Richard Burton helped me with acting classes, and after a few lines in several films, I progressed to larger parts until I auditioned to play Laurence Olivier's love interest, Tina, the beauty queen in Tony Richardson's The Entertainer. Picked from 500 hopefuls to play Tina, the leggy northern lass who wins a pageant and ends up in Archie's bed. The actress, who shot to fame nearly half a century ago, says she was always the youngest in any cast when she started out. She was 19 when she landed her first film role, playing a young beauty queen Tina alongside Sir Laurence Olivier in the 1960 film The Entertainer. I turned up to casting in a room crowded with young women, all looking the same except I was a bit younger, so I let the ponytail down, took the hoop out of my petticoat and read the lines in my best RP, as I'd been taught to. It changed her life overnight. Field's career is littered with episodes involving some of the biggest names in the business. Her initial meeting with Olivier is memorable for all the wrong reasons. I wasn't impressed with Olivier when I met him. I'm in bed with him, filming in a caravan, and he starts talking. "Now who's your favourite actor or actress, dear?" I said Marilyn Monroe, and he went off into a fit. Dreadful girl. Never shows up on time. So we get over that. 2 days later he again tries, very patronising. "Who else do you admire?" So I said, "I love Vivian Leigh," and he went into a fury. He was horrible. I got out of his bed and said, "I'm not staying here with you. Every time you ask me something and I answer, you're always rude," and I went and sulked. Tony came mincing over and said, "What's the matter, darling?" And I went, "I'm not staying in bed with him. He gets on my nerves." She succeeded in worming an apology from Olivier, who, when he saw the daily rushes of the scenes they'd shot, danced through the streets with her and invited her to join his old Vic company. Lack of confidence made her turn him down. But by the mid-1950s, London was a predatory world. I did lots of pictures for a tenner a time, but I wouldn't do nude or rude. Mostly I sidestepped the exploitation. Thank God I didn't get caught up in sex and drugs and rock and roll. Meanwhile, Field was taken on by an agency that found small movie parts for young women. The girls protected each other. Field endured 5 years of wolves trying to take advantage, pressuring her to have sex, offering glamorous holidays. I didn't go on them because I didn't want to be tested. I was afraid I might enjoy that world. Meanwhile, I had a steady boyfriend who was loyal and very nice, and a bit boring, but since then I've often chosen the wrong men. She married the aristocratic RAF pilot and racing driver Charles Crichton Stewart on 7th of July 1967, and they had a daughter, Nicola Crichton Stewart, who was born the same year. The marriage ended in divorce during the late 70s. Towards the end of the decade, Field began to land good roles. She appeared in teen rebellion film Beat Girl alongside future pop star Adam Faith. For Field, who was once known as the British Marilyn Monroe, the 60s were the busiest decade. And then, she was young and still learning. Following a string of successful performances in British productions, her first performance in a leading role for an American production was in The War Lover, co-starring Robert Wagner and Steve McQueen. She worked for Hammer Films, missing out on being a Bond girl. Cubby Broccoli said he couldn't hire me because you're above the title now, and saw her big Hollywood opportunity evaporate when the spectacular Mayan drama Kings of the Sun, starring Yul Brynner, flopped. Field's portrayal of Ixchel opened to more avenues for improvement, covered layers of conflict of emotions for being the love interest of the captured Black Eagle, who chose her to be his bride, the final wish of the sacrificial victim. She was a woman thrust into the life of the young king, whose emotional tie to her was becoming too intense. To Black Eagle she was the most beautiful woman in the heavens, who would come and heal his wounds. To her, despite the fact that he had the look of a savage, he seems to have the soul of a man. Her career slowed down in the 70s, but she bounced back in the 80s with Stephen Frear's My Beautiful Laundrette, and in the 90s Peter Chelson's Joseph Locke biopic Hear My Song. She was pleasantly surprised at how enthusiastically her performances were received all over the country, and how much she enjoyed visiting so many different cities and towns and the wonderful welcome she received. I loved everything about America. They made me feel positive. They made me feel beautiful. Made me feel special. But the work ethic wasn't the same. Also, I was homesick for English roots. When everything you ever dreamed of comes true by the age of 22, then it's all too much. I didn't believe that I belonged anywhere, and I couldn't start all over again. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Shirley Ann Field? She has latterly carved a niche as a character actress in such films as My Beautiful Laundrette and Hear My Song.